My grandmother Dieta died about 10 years ago. It was a bitter pill for me to swallow. I've been close with her as a child when she took care of me when my mom was working. But later on in life, as I grew up and she moved on into her senior years, um, her bipolar disorder crept in and became more prominent. And the symptoms that she experienced made it hard for me and my family to relate to her. And fairly quickly after this developed and her alcoholism developed along with it as a form of self-medication, I believe, we had to stop seeing her and spending time with her. And that was very hard for me to understand as a kid, and also hard for me to live with because I wasn't seeing this wonderful person who had been in my life for so long. Then I learned from my mom later on about her bipolar disorder because my mom had worked with her on that and her other health challenges, and got closer to her in her later years and had a few good years with her, taking her out to dinner and so forth regularly to save her before she passed away. So I'm grateful for that time. But I wish that her bipolar disorder had not interfered with her life with us as it had. So today's topic is innovations in bipolar disorder treatment. Very apt. I'm Brandon Staglin, and this is One Mind Brainwaves. Bipolar disorder is characterized by extreme mood swings, such as very euphoric highs or very deep, dark, depressive lows. It can affect everything from sleep and energy to the ability to think and learn and even to work. Better treatments are desperately needed, treatments that are safer and more effective. And researchers are working on treatments like this right now, and this research is bringing hope to millions of people around the world. One of those researchers is here with us today. Later in the program, our team at One Mind Cyber Guide gives a review of an app to help you track your normal ups and downs with mood. But first, Dr. Craig Fonzo is a 2020 recipient of the One Mind Bazooki Brain Research Fund Rising Star Award for his research on mood disorders such as bipolar. And before we go into the interview with him and one of his participants in his study, we have a short documentary film produced for One Mind by the award-winning team of Matt and Beth Hames at Alpheus Media. And this is going to document and show in a very riveting format the work of Dr. Greg Fonzo and his study. So let's see that video right now, please.
Mental illness is a critical issue in society. Statistics show that 1 in 5 individuals will meet criteria for an anxiety disorder in any given year. About 1 in 15 will meet criteria for major depression in any given year. Grab 5 people off the street, one of them probably has an anxiety disorder. And this data is actually prior to the current COVID pandemic. Now more than ever, it's critical that we explore and figure out new ways to treat mental illness and to help alleviate the suffering that it causes.
Please face to the detector frame. Normal temperature.
I've always been interested in investigating ever since I was a young kid. I was always asking questions to my parents. I'm sure it annoyed them to no extent. How does this work? Why does this happen? It's just always fascinated me to understand more about things, particularly things related to the natural world and science. My work is really focused on trying to improve treatments for individuals with affective disorders, which is a broad class of mental disorders that encompasses things like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The generous funds provided by One Mind are really focused on a new form of neuromodulation technology based on sound waves. I think a good metaphor is the brain is like a system of highways, we might say. We might think about information being the cars traveling across the highways. With tools like brain modulation, essentially what we're doing is we are injecting traffic into certain areas of the brain. When we're stimulating a brain area repeatedly, what that does is it actually changes the roadways. Hi, Shaylin.
Hi,
I'm Dr. Fonzo.
Nice to
Pleasure
meet
to meet
you.
you. Yeah,
it's great to put a face to the name and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing we'll do is just have you sign in here
Okay.
and then get your temperature checked.
Oh, yeah. Having bipolar is like being on a roller coaster, especially one that you've never been on before. You don't know what's coming next. You're on top of the world, and the next thing you know, you're spinning around and you're dropping out of the sky, and the world is upside down.
Here today. Feel free to have a seat.
I've been doing therapy and I've been on medications for my entire adult life. When I experience, those low feelings, it's completely debilitating where I can't get out of bed. I usually just end up scrolling through Netflix, most of the time not even watching anything. I take a lot of naps. It's difficult to bring myself to do anything at all. I've had depressive episodes that have gone on for, like a month or two. And then suddenly, all of the energy that I was missing comes flooding back. I'm up at 3 a.m. refinishing furniture because it just needed to be done right then. It's really difficult to find the right meds that work with you where the benefits outweigh all of the side effects that are commonly associated. So if there was any way to cut out some of that, I would definitely go for it. What are the next steps for today?
Basically, the study that we're going to be running today really has two parts.
I'm very excited about this trial. The first part of it is utilizing this ultrasound technology, applying it to the brain in individuals with and without an affective disorder, while individuals are also undergoing neuroimaging, specifically something called functional magnetic resonance imaging, to observe the brain in real time and see how the ultrasound, when applied to the brain target, actually changes the function of the brain circuits.
This is a low-intensity focused ultrasound device. We can use a focused ultrasound to pierce through the brain structure without any kind of surgical intervention, using a focused ultrasound pulse. This is where the transducer is held. We place it up against the temporal bone. It's the thinnest part of the bone on your skull. You're going to get a set of scrubs.
The baseline targeting procedure. We essentially figure out where the placement of the ultrasound transducer on the head would be in order to ideally hit the area of the brain that we're going after. This area of the brain is called the amygdala, and it tends to be hyperactive in individuals with an affective disorder. The amygdala location can vary across people depending on the size of their brain, the shape of their skull. It can take a little bit of time to figure out the right placement. It's trial and error, primarily at this point.
Let's see if we can hit the placement on the first try, you think?
We're getting better. I'd say practice is definitely improving our ability to do this more quickly.
All right, and that's a brain. Excellent. All right, so let's see. There's the bullseye. Right. So I think we need to move it down 3/4 of a centimeter, I'd say. I think we just have to go down like 1/2 centimeter.
I totally geek out when we get a clean shot of the amygdala. It's almost like playing a video game to some extent.
Third time's the charm, right?
Once you hit it, it feels really good to see that, get a little dopamine rush.
Perfect. We're right at 65 millimeters, right in the center of the left amygdala. That's the amygdala. We're dead on where we should be.
Cha-ching! So the next step, individuals with an affective disorder will have the opportunity to repeat this ultrasound procedure.
Hi, Shaylin.
Hi again.
Good to see you again.
They come back once a day for 5 days a week over the course of about 3 weeks.
Good to go.
For myself, the treatment is a brand new way to approach depression.
All right, and then I'll pull this up a little bit.
So it's like, let's get to where this actually comes from.
We'll go ahead and hit go on this, and it'll take about 10 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, excellent.
I would be happy with just being able to get to more of like a normal kind of day to day where I don't have those really low lows and I don't have the really high highs. Like that just sounded like a good place to start.
Ideally, if we hit a home run and we do end up curing her of her depressive symptoms, that would be amazing. But I think the goal would be to understand more about the circuitry in the brain and how it responds to the ultrasound.
What I hope to see is that I can experience what typical people experience every day. So being able to kind of set down that burden, relax, and just be there in that present moment and enjoy it for what it is.
To receive the Rising Star Award at One Mind means a huge amount to me and the research that I'm pursuing. Utilizing state-of-the-art technology to a brain target that we know is critically important for these disorders and which we've not been able to reach before with existing methods. It's a golden opportunity to be able to break new ground. Hopefully, this will lead to developments in the area that will greatly and vastly improve our ability to treat mental illness.
And joining us now is Dr. Greg Fonzo. He's the assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin. He's also the recipient of the 2021 Mind Mizuki Brain Research Fund Rising Star Award for his research in bipolar disorder treatments. Joining us also is Shaylin, who you just met in the film. She's one of the participants in Dr. Fonzo's study. Greg and Shaylin, thanks so much for being with us and welcome to Brainwaves.
Thank you, Brandon. Pleasure to be here.
Likewise. And viewers, thank you for watching. If you have any questions for our guest today, feel free to post them in the chat during this webcast. Thanks for watching. Greg, let me start with you. As we saw in the film, your current study targets neural structure in the brain known as the amygdala. What exactly is the amygdala? What does it do? And how does it help regulate mood? And how does it influence mood disorders like bipolar disorder?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. And there's a lot to discuss with that. So the amygdala is it's a collection, I guess if we just define it first, it's a collection of gray matter nuclei in the medial temporal lobe of the brain. So essentially, the temporal lobe is on the side, and then towards the center of the head, you have the amygdala within that lobe itself. And what we know is that it's critically involved in many different emotional processes. Broadly speaking, it has a input and output sort of a structure to it. So it collects inputs from different sensory areas of the brain. And in doing so, it's able to sort of take in sensory information that's coming in from one's senses. And then what it does is it seems to be a sort of detector of something in your environment that might be important. And so when it detects, for example, like if there's a hungry bear running at you, that's something that obviously would be it would be helpful to notice that and be aware of it and draw your attention to it. And so the amygdala, when it receives incoming information that tells it that something important is occurring, it then has an output center that will essentially cause the person to become more alert and more aware of what's going on in their environment. And then they can respond appropriately to the hungry bear, for example. So that's kind of the processes and the ways in which it works. And in regards to emotion, we know that emotions are oftentimes provoked by things in our environment that are salient or important. Maybe an angry face from a family member, or a frown from a boss, for example, or even a happy, something that makes one happy, like a surprising a gift that somebody gives to you. All these things will sort of activate the amygdala and cause the person to divert their attention there and become more aware of that thing in their environment. And so we think in regards to something like bipolar disorder that we know from sort of many years of brain imaging studies, both in bipolar as well as other mood disorders like depression and anxiety disorders and PTSD, that this brain area tends to be hyperactive in people suffering from these conditions, which means that essentially it's sort of activated and utilized more than the average person in people with these conditions, and particularly in response to emotional stimuli. So a lot of times people will use like emotional faces as a way to kind of probe amygdala function, or rewarding stimuli, for example, like money or other kinds of pleasing images. And what we know is that in bipolar disorder specifically, that the amygdala tends to be hyperactive both to negative and fear-provoking stimuli, for example, as well as rewarding stimuli. And we think that that might have something to do with the sort of the dual nature of mood dysregulation in that disorder. So the amygdala, we might say, might be involved in cueing emotional or mood responses to stimuli in the environment. And so that might be something that is a key process underlying bipolar disorder and the instability in mood.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it seems like potentially people with mood health conditions might be more reactive to certain incoming stimuli, certain situations and they experience that makes their mood regulation less stable, and thus they might react more to certain things that could. Yeah, that's fascinating. And you've worked to develop a new treatment for bipolar disorder and other mood disorders. It focuses on ultrasound, and it's focusing on the amygdala. And you say there are limits to the current tools used to treat mood disorders that use neurostimulation or even pharmaceuticals, drugs, for example. What way are these limited, these existing treatments, and how do you hope to improve upon these through your study?
Yeah, so the existing treatments for really for all mood disorders, I guess, but bipolar disorder specifically, are things like medications, psychotherapies, and brain modulation approaches. So in regards to medications and therapies, they have some efficacy for treating the condition, but we know that it's limited. There's a lot of, for example, trial and error approaches to utilizing those things. Some medications will work for some people, but not others, and we don't really understand why that is. So there's a lot of sort of guesswork involved in the treatment approach at this point. And one reason we think that might be is that something like a medication is kind of acting globally, right? You ingest it, and then it gets kind of distributed throughout your body and your brain. And so it may not necessarily be reaching the right areas, for example, in a particular person. And then there are approaches that are more focal, I guess, or designed to kind of target specific brain areas. Those are things like brain modulation is kind of the broad term for it. But that includes things like the most common form nowadays is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or we call it RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation for short. And RTMS is a very popular method of trying to modulate brain function to have a therapeutic benefit for people, particularly in depression. It's FDA cleared for that condition, and also utilized to some extent in bipolar disorder and anxiety disorders as well. Now, the issue with RTMS is that it utilizes magnetic fields to try and create essentially firing in neurons in certain areas. But the problem is that it can only reach so far into the brain. So the brain itself has kind of the cortex is sort of the area on the outside, and that's really the area that we can hit with something like RTMS. That we can't reach the deeper structures of the brain, for example, like the amygdala and other kind of what we call subcortical brain structures due to the depth. And so to reach those areas, you either have to do invasive procedures like something like deep brain stimulation, where they'll actually stick electrodes into your brain in order to be able to stimulate the particular area. But that obviously is not a viable treatment approach for a lot of people. It's expensive, and everybody's not necessarily well suited to that. So what we're hoping is with this ultrasound technique that we might be able to fill that gap in terms of having a non-invasive treatment modality that can reach these deep brain areas that we know are critically important for mood disorders and bipolar disorder. Ultrasound has that advantage because it is not limited in terms of the depth that you can target as it is with TMS. So we have, for example, an ultrasound system manufactured by Brain Sonics, which has focal depths that can reach areas like the amygdala, which are about 6 to 7 centimeters past the skull. So if we're able to modulate the amygdala with something like ultrasound, that would be a huge advance for the field in our ability to be able to modulate the brain in therapeutic ways.
Yeah, that's amazing. So actually to reach the center of the brain that is so important for mood disorders, like we talked about a moment ago, it needs a new technology like focused ultrasound to get that deep into the brain where it is and kind of tweak it or influence it in a healthy way, right? So yeah, great
That's
work that you're doing there, and hope it pans out as something very beneficial for a lot of people. And speaking of benefits and or the experience of receiving the treatment, with us, of course, is Shaylin. Shaylin, thanks again for being with us today on Brainwaves. Yeah, and I have some questions for you. We've been talking a lot about bipolar disorder as an abstract kind of a thing, but we'd love to hear from your perspective. How has your experience been with mood disorders like you experience, and tell us a bit about your background too, please.
Yeah, so as far as like my experience with it, it it's like every day is like a little fortune cookie, and like I have to figure out, what today is going to be like. I have, days that are great. I feel on top of the world. I'm so productive. I'm getting things done, and it's such a good feeling that it almost tricks you into thinking like this is normal. This is how you should be all the time. And it feels great until some of those more like bad habits start coming in where it's like, I feel great. I'm going to garden. I go to Lowe's or Home Depot and I spend $200-300 like in one afternoon. And, I was feeling great when I did it. And then of course the consequences of like, this reckless kind of spending, at least my activities are harmless, but the impact that they do have on the rest of my life, like the long-term consequences are something that like I really have to consider. But I still say that it's a bit better than the lows that I experienced, because for me personally, it's not just lows. Like I'm not just really down and really sad or unmotivated. I also get agitated. Like I get very irritable. And of course, like I have a 4-year-old daughter. And so, when she's wanting to play with me or she wants to go and do something and I just don't have the energy for it, there are times where I've snapped at her and she doesn't understand, she's 4. And so it's also, there's a lot of guilt that kind of comes with it, with the territory is like, I don't have the energy. I don't have the motivation to go and do these things with her. And I inadvertently snap at her or I'm disappointing her. And then I have to like, on top of, already feeling so down, I now have this layer of guilt of, why can't I be better? Why can't I be there for my daughter when she needs me and she wants to do these things? And, for me, like, that's the most important thing is having that relationship with her where like, I'm her person that she can come to and that we can do activities together and like grow together. So not being present for that is really the biggest downside.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It must be really frustrating not to be in the kind of state of mind that would help you connect with your daughter or folks around you or keep you on a more even keel that you'd like to be on to have more behavior that's perhaps less reckless, like you were talking about with the mania. So thanks for sharing about your experience. And in terms of Dr. Fonzo's study, how did you find out about it and why did you decide to participate in it?
I found out about it through a friend of mine who was doing work with the study. She was talking about it. And I was like, oh, that sounds like something that'd be right up my alley. For me, the interest that I had with the study is definitely from the fact that I have been on all sorts of medications. I have gone through all of the trial and error, all of the withdrawals from coming off of medications that just weren't working, the side effects for ones that kind of benefited me, but where the side effects kind of outweighed the benefits from staying on them. I've been in therapy for years. I feel like I had tried, all of the typical things that you do. And it's just, if there was an opportunity to try something different, like something completely unheard of, at least as far as handling, bipolar and manic depression, I was willing to try it. especially with it being like non-invasive. I don't want someone swirling around in my brain. So it was definitely like an interesting take on treatment options.
Fantastic. And does it offer you some hope to be participating in a study like this that could help with what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, like, I definitely hope that, I benefit directly from the study, but even worst case scenario, if I still am struggling with this, I mean, it gives someone else an opportunity. Like it's always going to be adjustments and making changes to perfect, this line of treatment. And so if I'm a stepping stone on that, at least I've potentially helped someone down the road that's dealing and struggling with things that I have been living with.
Thanks. I identify with that. I was a participant in a clinical trial when I was about 20 years ago for an experimental treatment for schizophrenia called cognitive training, and it really was beneficial for me. But in part because it gave me a lot of hope that I could have some benefit for me from the new treatment, but also because it could benefit others through the science. So I admire the work you're doing with Dr. Fonzo for that regard too. But I do hope it helps you as well.
Thanks, me too.
Yeah.
As do I. And sorry, Brandon, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I thank you, Shaylin, for, you your story and also for participating because, you and individuals like you are the reason why, science happens. That really, we couldn't do any of this without people that are willing to, help us out. And so thank you so much for doing that. And I think I do hope that this is a helpful experience for you.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah. And Greg, so when patients like people like Shaylin get involved in your study, what do they experience? What kind of procedures do they undergo? Can you describe that for us, please?
Sure. Yeah. So in this study, there's really two main parts I would break it up into. So the first is, let's go with three. So the first would be sort of assessment and sort of answering a lot of questions, I guess, about symptoms and, how they're impacting one's life. And really that's just sort of establishing, sort of a diagnosis for one, just in terms of allowing us to gather that information, but also in identifying and making sure someone's eligible for this procedure and that giving us the ability to quantify impairment and how much symptoms are impacting one so that we can actually measure change over time. So that's kind of the first part is sort of assessment and eligibility. The second would be a procedure that would be, I guess we could call it an acute manipulation of the brain using ultrasound. And so individuals will come in and undergo a neuroimaging procedure called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or Fmri for short, because that is a really long thing to say over and over again. So what we do is Fmri is a way to look at brain function over time. And it's similar to a standard MRI that you might get where you can look at someone's structure, but this allows us to track changes in the way oxygen is being distributed throughout the brain. And that gives us some indication as to how people's brains are working over a period of time. And fortunately, we're able to combine the ultrasound with this Fmri procedure. And so we can look in somewhat real time in terms of how the brain responds when we turn on the ultrasound and versus when it's off. And that gives us some indication of being able to what we call engage this target. So we can look at the amygdala and how it responds to ultrasound, as well as how the rest of the brain responds to that process. And so that's the acute portion of the study where we have people do that. And then we're in that portion, we're going to have people that are healthy as well as those that are suffering from bipolar and other mood disorders so that we can look at how the brain might respond differently in those individuals depending on the presence of this condition. And then the treatment portion, which is what we'll call the chronic administration portion, is when we take people that underwent the first part and then the people with a mood disorder, and we invite them to come back essentially once a day, Monday through Friday for 3 weeks to receive the same ultrasound treatment that they got while they were undergoing Fmri. And the hope is that the treatment itself will allow us to sort of quiet down the function of the amygdala and that if we apply that repeatedly over time, that will have some benefit for people in terms of improving their symptoms. Mm-hmm. And we're not exactly sure if it will work, but we're hopeful. And we think there's a strong sort of scientific basis to make that prediction. And hopefully what it might do is allow people like Shaylin to be able to ride out some of these ups and downs a little more smoothly. If we think about the amygdala as being sort of a reactive part of the brain, that if we're able to quiet it down a little bit, it might sort of smooth things out and make the ups and downs a little bit less prominent for people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would imagine the side effects would be probably less prominent than those for medications like lithium or other pharmaceuticals. Is that what you hope?
That's an excellent point. Yes. So at least from what we've seen thus far, people don't actually seem to feel anything when they're getting it. It seems to be a pretty innocuous kind of procedure. And yes, there are no side effects that we're aware of at this point. We're going to be tracking that obviously to make sure. But yeah, I would think medications would have a lot more side effects that would be undesirable compared to something like ultrasound.
Yeah, Shaylin, does that fit with your experience of the treatment so far? Have you had no side effects or?
Yeah, nothing that I've noticed. And I'm pretty sensitive to stuff like that. It's like having gone through a bunch of medication changes over the years. I'm always on the lookout for like any kind of change that I'm experiencing after starting something new. And I will say that like I haven't really noticed any negative side effects from the treatments that we've had so far.
That's great to hear. That's promising. Hopefully it's the same for most people who undergo the treatment. We're talking today, viewers, with Dr. Greg Fonzo, the recipient of the 2020 One Mind Suzuki Brain Research Fund Rising Star Award for his research on bipolar disorder treatments. Also talking with Shaylin, participant in Dr. Fonzo's study. Viewers, if you have any questions or comments for our guests today, please post them in the chat feature of this webcast. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have any friends or family who you think might benefit from hearing about the insights that our guests are sharing today, please share this webcast with them. We'd love to help spread the word. So, Greg, what inspired you to go into the field of neuroscience and specifically to focus on mood disorders?
Yeah, so, wow, that's a long time ago. Let me think. I think the thing that really got me interested in neuroscience was actually anecdotally a interest in psychology. So I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, but I always had a fascination with biology and sort of how things work in terms of the biological mechanisms. So my initial interest was in psychology. I took an abnormal psychology course and was just fascinated by how things could essentially just sort of the myriad of manifestations that people could demonstrate in terms of behavior and thoughts and emotions. And that got me very interested in pursuing that as a field, because I had a passion for wanting to help people and making a positive impact. And so I thought maybe clinical psychology would be a good venue for that. In my undergraduate studies, I also got involved with research as part of a undergraduate research program at University of Georgia. And that actually, I ended up getting involved with a psychologist who was doing research at the time with brain imaging, functional magnetic resonance imaging. And that was how I got introduced to that technology. And I thought it was just so fascinating to be able to observe something like the brain, which is so complex and so hard to, you can't just take it out and look at it, right? It's so hard to study in humans. And so that for me really sold me on the idea of pursuing human neuroscience focused research, and particularly in regards to mental illness, mood disorders, and anxiety, and really trying to utilize that approach to help people with these conditions.
That's awesome. And you've done a lot of great work so far with it, including your current study. And Shaylin, how has your experience been in Dr. Fonzo's study? Have there been any surprises, or has it kind of matched what you expected?
He was very great about setting my expectations for every step of the study. So I wouldn't say there was any like real surprises in the procedure itself. I had never had an MRI before, so I guess the biggest surprise there was they're very loud, but at the same time, it was very soothing. I almost fell asleep in it. But that was the only surprise. I did not expect to get so tired. with this thing, like, screeching in my ear at me.
It sounds like he help you feel very comfortable with the process.
Yes, it's very, very smooth. And Dr. Fonzo is absolutely amazing.
Well, that's great. I think he's amazing too. He's doing great work, and I'm glad to hear your experience matches that. Greg, it typically takes many years for a new treatment to be developed into something that can actually be distributed to patients on a large scale so people can benefit from it in general. How long do you think it might be before people like Shaylin overall throughout our society could benefit from a treatment derived from what you're studying right now?
Yes, it does unfortunately take a long time for things to go from sort of development to implementation. I think maybe if I sort of map out the typical route, and then I'll give a little context for that. So the typical route is, you develop an experimental treatment in a lab somewhere, and you begin to test it, like we're doing under the auspices of this award. And then ideally, you get some promising findings, you publish those, and then you get other people excited about it, and they start to do, similar research. And that ideally, that's a great thing, because that starts to, sort of exponentially increase the output of research findings in this area. And then at a certain point, when you reach sort of a critical mass of positive findings, then you can begin to start to design studies that will be able to lead to something like FDA clearance or FDA approval for a particular treatment for a particular condition. At that point, it then becomes a matter of conducting really large scale studies that are really well controlled and well designed, that will give you a definitive answer about whether or not this treatment is going to be on average effective for people with a particular condition. So that whole process in and of itself can take, years, like 5 to 10 years, for example. And that might even be an optimistic estimate. And then at that point, once it does reach FDA if it reaches FDA clearance, to be a particular, or to a treatment for a particular condition, then there's really then the commercial aspect of it, and really getting it disseminated, having it become a technology that, the average person can go to their, psychiatric provider and be able to receive, which can also be quite a challenge in terms of getting that disseminated and implemented, and getting that up and running across many different places. So I would say, it can be a many year process for something to go from development to actual widespread implementation. And there are, I think, ways to accelerate that. But on average, it takes far too long, I would say, unfortunately. But that's sort of the way in which, the system is designed. And I think for a good reason, to prevent things from becoming, treatments, quote unquote, too quickly when we don't know, and we haven't fully researched the effects of them to make sure that they are beneficial and they're not dangerous. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to protect people, but at the same time, you want to help them get the benefits of new technologies as they come out as quickly as possible, because people are they need them and can benefit from them. Do you see potential for people to enroll in clinical trials like yours growing as if your research is successful, it catches on more and more with more researchers doing it?
Yes, absolutely. I think ultrasound really has a potential to be if not, on the same level as something like TMS, which is utilized in regular clinical care, but at least close to that in the next 5 to 10 years. In a research setting, at the very least. And I think that there's several investigators that are pursuing similar work that I'm in contact with, that are looking at ultrasound for various other conditions as well, and looking at various other sites in the brain to stimulate. And so I think the field is growing, and I think there's more and more attention to this as a potential treatment option. And I'm hopeful that it will really pan out to be something very useful for us as clinicians.
Yeah, I hope so. And things are looking good so far based on what we've seen and heard. So, Shaylin, when you think about recovery and the life you'd like to build for yourself as you progress through this journey, how do you envision that life, and where would you like to be as you get well from this bipolar disorder?
I mean, where I want to be specifically is just balanced. Like I don't want to have high highs, like those days where I feel on top of the world and amazing and I'm so productive. Like those are great, but they're not healthy. And I want to have just this nice balance of, like I'm having a good day. And I understand that there might still be days where like I'm a little down, but that's completely understandable based on, circumstances in life. But I don't want it to be completely debilitating one way or the other. I want to have a nice balance where I feel mostly good most of the time and have, the energy that I need to keep up with my daughter because she runs circles around me. And I want to be able to keep up. I want to be able to do things with her. And I want to be able to enjoy the hobbies that I have without going overboard and, just keep myself busy.
That's a beautiful vision. And do you find it helps to kind of think about that when you are going through the hard times? Think about this is where I would like to be and that I have hope to get there.
To be honest, it's difficult to even remember, like, I like to remind myself of these nice things because when I am having those really low lows, it's hard to imagine anything ever being anything else. So, I mean, as much as I try and remind myself, like, this is temporary, I'm going to feel better and I have things to look forward to. I mean, it's a struggle to even tell myself those things because everything else is telling me you're always going to feel like this. There's no point. Like nothing's going to get better. You're just going to get better for a bit and then you're going to be right back here. So that's what the therapy is for. Is when the meds don't help and then the voice in the back of my head is saying all of these negative things, like, talking it through with the therapist, kind of reinforcing that, these things are temporary. They do get better. They do change. And I'm actively participating in things that can make a difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I identify with that too. There have been times when I felt so down, I thought, well, this is how it's just going to be. And but so you should know that many people experience that. I'm sure you know that, and you're definitely not alone. And we're rooting for you in this process. So best wishes for your health as things go forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So now we come to a fun part of the show. We're going to wrap it up with the lightning round. And I'm going to ask each of you 5 rapid fire questions. And I'd like to have each of you answer those questions in 30 seconds or less in total for all 5 questions. So do it one person at a time. I want your first answer, best answer. We'll start with Shaylin, and then we'll go to Greg after Shaylin finishes her question. How does that sound to you guys?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Okay, let's do it. All right, we'll have lightning strike twice, I think, here. Shaylin, ready?
Yes.
Okay. What helps you cope when you're going through a tough time mentally?
Ooh, probably my partner. He's very supportive and always has something cheerful and positive to say.
Awesome. What gives you the most stress relief? A person, dog, or cat, or other?
Other activity, actually.
Fantastic. What types of music do you turn to when you're feeling down?
So when I'm feeling down, it's definitely things that are upbeat. Like I try and force myself out of it. So a lot of like dance music and pop.
Uh-huh. What are you most looking forward to in a post-pandemic world?
Oh, being able to go back to like see my band, like my favorite bands live, like going to shows has been probably the biggest heartbreak of this entire pandemic.
Okay. And what gives you hope?
That someday this will be over. all of the bad things will be over.
Here, here. Yes. Thank you so much, Shaylin. Awesome. Thanks for your answers. Greg, your turn. What helps you cope when you're going through a tough time mentally?
I would say my meditation practice and spirituality, spiritual teachers and that kind of thing.
Awesome. And what gives you the most stress relief? A person, dog, cat, or other?
My 2 cats.
Awesome. What type of music do you turn to when you're feeling down?
So I actually like to, when I'm feeling down, I listen to sad music. I like kind of old, like maybe not too sad, but like maybe classic rock ballads or something like that that has a sad tinge to it. It kind of helps me identify with my emotions.
I get it. Yeah, yeah. And so, what do you most look forward to in a post-pandemic world?
Oh man, I actually, so Shaylin took my answer. I was going to say go to see bands. I love live music. So that, and also going on cool vacations.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
Yeah,
good one.
yeah. And what gives you hope?
Oh, I would say the ingenuity of the human spirit, just seeing people come up with new ideas, new things, innovating, being themselves, and just contributing what they have to the world.
Yeah, that is so inspiring. The makers, you're a maker as well, and so thanks for all the great work you do, Greg and Shaylin. Thank you as well for being on the show with us today, sharing your experiences with us.
Of course, it was great being here. I'm glad that I could kind of bring light to this experience that I go through.
Absolutely.
Like you said, other people experience this too, and talking about it definitely, bringing visibility to it. It helps. It makes a difference.
It really does. Thank you. And viewers, thank you for watching. Really appreciate you being with us today on Brainwaves. Before you go, we're going to feature a review of an app that helps you track your ups and downs with mood. This may be something that may help with what you're experiencing in your own life. This app is called Mood Mission, and our wonderful team at One Mind Cyber Guide is going to give you their review of this app right now. Take it away, One Mind Cyber Guide team.
Hi there. I'm Martha Neary, and I'm the project manager of One Mind Cyber Guide.
You probably already use your phone for many things throughout the day, but did you know that there are lots of apps out there to help you manage your mental health and well-being? There are thousands of mental health apps available for download today. With so many to choose from, it can be hard to separate the good from the bad. That's where One Mind Cyber Guide can help. At One Mind Cyber Guide, we review apps on 3 different metrics: credibility, user experience, and transparency. We've reviewed over 200 products, and all of these reviews are available for free on our app guide at onemindcyberguide.org.
Hi, I'm Stephen Schuler, and I'm the Executive Director of One Mind Cyber Guide. I'm a clinical psychologist and mental health service researcher, and my research focuses on the use of technology to increase access to mental health care. The work we do at One Mind Cyber Guide is important because there's a need for objective, third-party reviews of mental health apps and rigorous evaluation of their evidence base.
Mood Mission aims to help people experiencing symptoms of stress, anxiety, or depression. The app is based in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is an evidence-based therapy. Data from the app is being used for a research study conducted by Monash University, so users are asked to complete a number of short surveys before unlocking the app on topics such as well-being and moods and emotions. The app provides different activities or missions based on how you're feeling. You select how you feel at a particular time, for example, low, depressed, anxious, or worried, and how distressing your feelings are. You then choose from a range of options which best describe the problem. Based on your responses, 5 missions are provided, each with a stated objective and an explanation of why this might help. You can choose to accept a mission and mark the mission as complete when finished. Missions can be behavior-based, for example, learning how to knit, crochet, or sew, physical-based, like push-ups, thought-based, such as self-affirmations, or emotion-based, including things like reflecting on achievements. The mission log shows all completed missions and various achievements, and additional resources are also available. Visit our app guide at onemindcyberguide.org to read our review of Mood Mission. It has received a score of 4.67 out of 5 on credibility, 3.94 out of 5 on user experience, and it also receives a score of acceptable for transparency. We also have a professional review of Mood Mission where you can read some more about the pros and cons of the app, as well as some recommendations for use. We look forward to seeing you next week for another app review.
Thanks, Cyber Guide team. Thanks to Shaylin and Dr. Greg Fonzo. Viewers, thank you as well. Remember, you can always check out all of our past Brainwaves episodes at onemind.org/brainwaves. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Mental health is stepping out of the shadows and into the spotlight.
I think I need help.
Can you talk?
Struggling.
I'm here.
Depressed. Can't sleep.
But we need the science and solutions to change lives. Now, more than ever, we are in this fight together. We are of one mind, accelerating brain health for all. Help us fund new treatments at onemind.org.